Today, we're journeying back in time to one of the most consequential, yet often misunderstood conflicts of the late 20th century, the Soviet-Afghan War. This wasn't just a regional skirmish, it was a 10-year ordeal that hollowed out a superpower, reshaped the geopolitical landscape, and left scars on Afghanistan that endure to this day. So, what exactly happened? Why did the mighty Soviet Union invade its southern neighbor, and how did this decision become what many now call its own Vietnam? Our story begins in the late 1970s. Afghanistan was a nation in turmoil. In April 1978, a coup known as the Saur Revolution brought the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, or PDPA, to power. This communist party, backed by Moscow, immediately embarked on a radical program of land reform and social change, challenging centuries-old traditions. Predictably, this sparked widespread outrage and resistance, particularly in the conservative, rural areas of the country. Various anti-government factions, collectively known as the Mujahideen, began to rise up, declaring a holy war, or jihad, against the godless communist government in Kabul. The PDPA itself was fractured, with intense infighting between its two main factions, the Khalq and the Parcham, leading to purges and political instability. The situation was spiraling out of control. From Moscow, the aging Soviet leadership watched with growing alarm. They had invested heavily in the PDPA and feared the collapse of their client state. Losing Afghanistan would be a major blow to Soviet prestige and could potentially create an unstable, or worse, a pro-Western state right on their southern border. On top of that, they were concerned that Islamic fundamentalism could spread from Afghanistan into the Soviet Union's own Central Asian republics. After months of debate within the Politburo and a direct plea for intervention from the Afghan government, they made a fateful decision. On Christmas Eve 1979, Soviet forces rolled across the border. Their initial objective was limited: secure Kabul, depose the dangerously erratic President Hafizullah Amin, install a more compliant leader, and stabilize the country before making a swift exit. The Soviets achieved their initial goals with ruthless efficiency. Special forces stormed the presidential palace, Amin was killed, and he was replaced by Babrak Karmal, the leader of the Parcham faction. But the planned swift exit never materialized. Instead of being seen as liberators, the Soviet troops were viewed as foreign invaders, infidel occupiers. Their presence didn't quell the rebellion, it supercharged it. The various Mujahideen factions, once disparate and disorganized, now had a common, powerful enemy. The resistance movements swelled, attracting volunteers from across the Muslim world, and crucially, massive covert support from outside powers. This is where the Cold War dynamics really kick in. The United States, still smarting from its own defeat in Vietnam, saw a golden opportunity to bleed its arch-rival. Through the CIA's Operation Cyclone, Washington, in partnership with Pakistan's ISI and Saudi Arabia, began funneling billions of dollars in weapons, training, and financial aid to the Mujahideen. Suddenly, Afghan fighters were armed with sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles, like the Stinger, which could bring down Soviet helicopter gunships, the feared flying tanks of the Red Army. The war escalated dramatically. What was meant to be a short police action became a grinding, brutal quagmire. The Soviet military was a formidable machine, designed to fight a conventional war on the plains of Europe. But in Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain of rugged mountains and hidden valleys, their tanks and armored columns were vulnerable. They controlled the cities and the main highways by day, but the countryside belonged to the Mujahideen by night. The Soviet soldiers were young conscripts, ill-prepared for the psychological toll of a guerrilla war against an invisible, determined, and deeply entrenched enemy. They faced ambushes, booby traps, and a hostile population. Morale plummeted, and the war became a brutal cycle of search and destroy missions, retaliatory strikes, and immense civilian suffering. Millions of Afghans were killed or displaced, fleeing to neighboring Pakistan and Iran, creating one of the largest refugee crises in the world. For nearly a decade, the war dragged on. Inside the Soviet Union, the official narrative was one of internationalist duty, helping a fraternal socialist nation. But the truth began to leak out. The zinc coffins returning home, the whispers of wounded soldiers, and the growing economic strain started to erode public support. The war was costing the USSR billions of rubles a year, a crippling burden for its already stagnating economy. By the mid-1980s, a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, came to power. He saw the war for what it was, a bleeding wound. He understood that it was draining the nation's resources, undermining its international standing, and preventing the domestic reforms he desperately wanted to implement. Gorbachev began the process of disengagement. After signing the Geneva Accords in 1988, the slow, painful withdrawal began. On February 15, 1989, the last Soviet soldier, General Boris Gromov, walked across the Friendship Bridge back into Soviet territory. The 10-year war was finally over. But for Afghanistan, the peace was fleeting. The Soviet-backed government collapsed within 3 years, and the victorious Mujahideen factions, armed to the teeth and with no common enemy left to fight, turned on each other. This plunged the country into a devastating civil war, which in turn paved the way for the rise of the Taliban in the mid-1990s. Looking back, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a strategic blunder of epic proportions. It failed to achieve any of its long-term goals. Instead, it hastened the collapse of the Soviet Union itself, dealing a fatal blow to its military prestige, economy, and political morale. It devastated Afghanistan, leaving behind a legacy of violence, instability, and a deeply fragmented society. The echoes of this conflict are undeniable, shaping the events that would lead to 9/11 and the subsequent US-led intervention. It serves as a powerful and tragic lesson about the limits of military power, the dangers of foreign intervention, and the unpredictable nature of history. The road to war is often paved with miscalculation, and the road back is always longer and more painful than anyone expects. Thank you so much for watching. This is a complex piece of history, and we've only scratched the surface. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into pivotal historical events.